Yeah, Joe. Well, I'm getting a feedback for you guys. Well, welcome to episode 114. It's a bit of a different time because Guillaume had to be on vacation, but it's good.
Yes, it happens.
It was good. And we will do quickly the news. The news is that we're still working on Quarkus 3, and the release coming up hopefully this week. But keep up to date on that one. And otherwise, release goes forward as always. And we are again, just remind people there are people who've contributed to Quarkus will get an email with a T-shirt notification in. That is not a scam. You can submit and do that. And otherwise, I think that'll be the quick one. And also, welcome to Holly. I forgot to mention you in the beginning. But we kind of been here before. So, Guillaume, you've been on before about your GitHub Actions stuff and automation, but you have news to us.
Yes, it has been 1 year and a half since we last talked about
really
stuff in the automation. Yes,
that's a lot.
Time flies, and so it was time to talk about an update. We had quite a lot of feedback on the GitHub Apps stuff. Feedback from users trying it with the main GitHub instance, but also users working with GitHub Enterprise. So we fixed a few things here and there, improved some stuff, made things configurable to better work with GitHub Enterprise. And also we added one major new feature that we will talk about today. And the second thing that I wanted to present today is a GitHub Actions extension. So this one is dedicated to develop GitHub Actions with Quarkus. It's based on the exact same principles as a GitHub App extension. So it should be really familiar with people already developing GitHub Apps with Quarkus GitHub App. And the nice thing is also that you can share components between the two. So you can write something that would both work for GitHub Apps and also GitHub Actions. That's typically something we do with the Quarkus build reporter, which provide feedback on CI runs. And now we have it running as a bot for the Quarkus project main repository. And it also runs as GitHub Actions for the forks. So it opens all sorts of possibility, and you can just use the same code for both GitHub Apps and GitHub Actions.
Maybe just to give people a context, it's like what you've done is that you're using the GitHub. Well, if you go on GitHub Marketplace, you'll find a lot of different actions and bots. Many of those are written in typically Node.js or TypeScript. Some are written in custom containers and all this stuff, but very few of them. I don't think I've seen many out there written in Java. Some in Go, but what with Quarkus, what you've done is that you've enabled, first of all, using just writing the app, but you've done it in a way so like the code you have to do is like, I call it trivially awesome. Like there's like very, very little compared to the setup that you need for even Node.js and Go. And you use all the powers of Quarkus to build time generate things and just automatically get things to work. But I guess you'll see. But anyway, if you are a user who wants to automate stuff on GitHub and you prefer to use Java over Node.js or something else, that's I guess that's what it does, right? So
I think it's also interesting if you're just using Quarkus for developing applications, because I think it's a good example of what you can do with extensions.
Yes.
How you can leverage Quarkus build time enhancement to actually wire things automatically and make sure that with a few annotation you can do a ton of things. That's what we do with both these extensions. And yeah, I think even just to better understand what you can do with Quarkus extensions and why we did Quarkus, because you actually see how much you can do at build time and how much we avoid to do things at runtime. I have prepared a small doc to follow so that we can have an intro. If you can share my screen, I will we'll just follow this doc. I have a few demos prepared to see how to show how we can do stuff.
You switch your screen to the thing. I'll turn on. There we go. Okay. Yeah, your screen is on.
Okay. So Quarkus GitHub App, the home is there. It's a Quarkus GitHub App project in the Quarkiverse. You have an extensive documentation also hosted in the Quarkiverse hub. I think
I can confirm that documentation is extensive as well, because I've done some development with the app, and I got to the bit that said in the docs there is expensive documentation, and I thought, yeah, right, and it really is. Every time I had a question, the answer was right there in the documentation. So it's some of the best documentation I've used.
Awesome.
Yeah, a few things were missing, I must admit, but I had a few people interested in it, and they reported stuff missing or things that were unclear, and so we improved it with them. And I think now we are to the point where you can just follow it and get your app working very, very fast. So as for the feedback, we fixed a few bugs and made a few announcements. As I said, the documentation was a bit improved in the process. We had a few issues with GitHub Enterprise. The main issue was that the REST API and the GraphQL API URLs are extremely different for Red Hat Enterprise, so you cannot deduce one from the other as we did for the main GitHub instance. So you can now configure them separately. So you can use the GraphQL API also with GitHub Enterprise. The nice thing is that we are using the Up4G GitHub API. So everything that went into this API to better support the GitHub REST API, so more method, more things, we got it in Quarkus GitHub App 2. And the main change we made in Quarkus GitHub App is called command-based commands. So I can just show a quick talk we did at G-Nation. Yeah, this one. So just to explain what command-based command is, it's something that when you add a command or in an issue or a pull request on GitHub, you get your bot to do something for you. Typically, a good example of that is DependaBot. When using DependaBot, you can do DependaBot rebase but just by adding a command in the pull request created by DependaBot. And so you have a lot of GitHub apps which work that way. And while it looks relatively simple because you just have to listen to the new command event and do something, actually the parsing of the command is not always easy if you want to do something a bit complex. Also, you have to handle all the feedback, telling the user, oh, I didn't understand this command, or okay, I have understood it. I'm handling it, and I will get back to you. All of this has been automated in the command extension for GitHub App.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Nice thing.
Yeah. So we can. I will do the demo a bit after that, but so we are using the Align library, which is a library for CLI it's used to parse command lines, and that's what actually you do when asking your bot to do something with a command. You actually have a CLI command, and you just parse it and you handle it. So that's very handy, and it has a lot of options to handle arguments, to handle the parsing and things like that. So we are supporting all the airline features in the extension. Also, you have things like permissions. So you can restrict a command to the admins or restrict it to a particular team you have created in your repository or your organization. You can limit the scope to issues or pull requests. Typically for some commands might only be relevant for pull request. And so you can say, oh, if the command is triggered in an issue, I just ignore it. You can use airline to generate some help. So it will automatically generate something similar to a man with all the commands, what they do, and you can ask for help like that. And yeah, and we have many more options which are documented in the documentation. So,
are you going to show the permission stuff?
no, not in the demo.
Just the add team. So that's going to be a statically defined team name, or is there a way to add like a dynamic part to it?
No, it's really the a manual team name. It's an annotation. So you just define the team and you just say, okay, the triage team can access this method, and then the extension will check for the authorization before executing the command.
Okay.
Okay, I think we can do the demo now. So the demo is actually creating a simple GitHub Apps with the command airline extension. So this is a separate extension from the default one. If you want this feature, you have to add this particular extension.
That's a very long extension name.
Yes. So it's going to get the extension from the registry. And once the project is created, we will just copy the YAML file with everything in it. So the .env file just contains the configuration to say, okay, this is this GitHub app, and okay, and then you know the drill. We will just start it with Quarkus dev. Okay. So the extension is started. At the moment, it doesn't do anything useful, so we will import it into the IDE. And then you just have to create a class, which we'll call it MyBot. And then you can just use annotation to define your So this is what will trigger the bot. So this is the tag that you need to use in your command to actually trigger the bot. It can be anything. If you prefer to have something like that, you can do it like that. The convention on GitHub is to use something with a mention, so you can do that way. You can add a description. This is not mandatory, but you can do it that way. And then the idea is to just create the commands. So the command has two. So all the commands of a given CLI has to implement the same interface. That's a constraint from the extension. So it's not really a biggie because you just have to implement one method to get it to run. But that's something that you need to do. So typically you will have something like that, and you will have a run method. You will have a run method. So in this case, what we want to do is to, every time an issue is created, every time the command is called, we will just add a command to say hello or hi, depending on the command. So what we need to inject here is a payload with the issue command. And that's all we really need in this interface. Unfortunately, the GitHub API, the Prodigy GitHub API throws EO exception on errors. So every time we have to add this. Next, you have to create your commands. So they are using the command annotation, and you will just have something like static. So the name of the command is what you will use. So if you want to trigger the commands, you will have to use @bot say hello. Again, you can add a description. And then you just have to implement it. So that's pretty much it. Just to show you that you can use the airline option, you can inject the argument of the command just there. You can use all the airline features, so you can use group of commands. Typically, a group of commands, a good example of that is git remote. You have the group remote, and you have subcommands for that. You can use these features. And here we will just get the issue and add a new command to the issue, which will say hello, and we will use the arguments. Okay, so that's all you need to implement for a basic command. So usually the gist of your command will be here in the run method, so you will have your command to do a ton of things, but everything is wired by the extension automatically, and that's all you need to do. We will just create another command that will do the exact same thing, just to show the routing and that it actually works. And also what we can do is to create a command that will explain how the command works. So you have a nice helper for that in the extension. And just just with that, you should have a working extension. The only things you need to do now is to actually point to the commands. So you just say you have hello, you have I, and you have the help one. Okay. And that's pretty much it. And if we are lucky and we go to GitHub, I have a playground project. Yes, except I started a new browser to not. Let me find it quickly.
Yeah, so the properties you have just set up the permissions and keys, I guess, and then it works. And it goes through like a web proxy, or what's the? I forgot what the setup is.
Yes, exactly. So we have a web proxy. It's connecting to sme.io, which is a service run by GitHub. And so the payloads that are generated there on GitHub are sent to the proxy, and the proxy sent it to my laptop. And then my laptop is doing direct requests to GitHub with the REST API. So if I'm lucky, I should be able to. Obviously, it worked. When I really. Yeah, obviously, that's how it works. So. Oh, nice. And the error message is funky. So I probably did something wrong somewhere. Well, I'm not completely sure, to be honest.
Missing sacrifice to the demo gods, clearly.
Yes, exactly. So I have my, I have the one that I used. So let me just quickly check what could have gone wrong there. So the description is there, the command is there, the description is there, and command. Oh, I wonder if it's no static. So it usually works. Not sure what's happening.
Can you diff the two against each other?
Yeah, I think I will do that next. So it's not a. So the command over there, description, command. So the only difference is that in one case the interface is public and the other it is not, but I don't see how it could be an issue.
So it gets the notification, but the response somehow is failing.
Yeah, apparently it's creating something, but yeah. Anyway, I'm not completely sure what's going on.
Could we run the other project?
Sure, we can. What is completely weird is that it's exactly the same thing. So
that will be useful though, because if that one fails, then you know it's nothing that you did just now. It's that somewhere in the ether, there's a demo god
yes,
throwing
exactly.
thunderbolts at anything coming from your laptop.
Let's check what's going on.
Yeah, it feels like me. I had an issue yesterday, and it changed behavior overnight. So
Obviously I hear that thing, and yeah, okay, so it
Hey.
works.
hi, magical.
Yeah, but see, it was the exact same code. I mean, it was just I don't know what's going on. I'll check later.
Copy paste in the properties that generated a different setup. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. The startup should be the same. I don't know. I'll check later. But anyway, it's so it's the exact same code we have in the other project. So it's very similar to that. And the nice thing is that so when you execute the command, it actually gives you a feedback.
Aww.
Saying, okay, I understood the command, I will execute it. So when the command is very fast, GitHub is not exactly ordered properly, so you get the command here before the feedback is actually displayed by GitHub. But if your command is actually taking some time, you have the feedback saying, okay, I'm handling it, and then you will have the result later. If we actually do the say I command this time, it's routed to the other command, and it say I. We can use, and if we, let's say we just use a command that we...
Can you zoom in just a little bit, Guillaume? The font is a bit small.
Oh, yes. Okay. So, and you can see if I'm using a command that is confusing for the GitHub app, and it cannot be interpreted and handled. So you have the confused emoji, and then you have a proper error message with the error and the help for the command. You can tweak all this. You can remove the feedback if you don't want it. You can remove the help if you don't want it. You can avoid displaying the error messages if you want it. You have a ton of options to actually configure the behavior of the app. Yeah, that's pretty much it for this part. So,
although I guess because it's running in dev mode, you could change it on the fly, couldn't you? And,
yes, exactly.
And see updates.
Exactly. So this is not the project actually running, but if I import the other one,
and then when you would deploy, would you deploy down to, would you compile down to a native app to deploy?
You can do that. That's what we do for the Quarkus bot. And so everything is working in native. If you want to, let's say we add a typo here, and we do this again. Yes.
Hey.
So you have a very tight feedback loop. If you can just code things, and then you just go to GitHub, add a comment, say what it does. You can also develop tests if you want. We have a test infrastructure for that. So yeah, you can do a lot of things with this. I don't know what happened to the demo. Probably the demo god, but it's really the same code than I used. So something weird might happen. But yeah, it's usually working very fine, and you can iterate very quickly.
So nice.
Yeah, and there are really a lot of options now, so you can really do very complex command-based bots with this stuff. So that's about it for this one. We can maybe just have a look at a good way to see how the documentation is. So you have the first command, so this is relatively easy. You can inject the issue command payload, so that's what we did. So we get the issue command and we can get the issue, add command to it, or just handle things based on the command that was passed. You can inject a root GitHub client if you want. You can inject a GraphQL client to access the GraphQL API. You can inject CDI beans if you want inside your commands. Then you have the option for the command. So I talked about the scopes, the fact that you can limit these to issues or pull requests. You can tweak the error strategy to add feedback, add a comment with your message and things like that. Same thing for the reaction strategy. You can tweak what you want as reactions. You can define options on the CLI if you want them to be global to all your commands. And you can still override them at the command level if you want. You can define several aliases if you want, typically shorter ones. The parse error strategy is about when you get a parse error, so you can define what to do in this case. The default is to add the confused emoji and then to display the help, but you can do whatever you want. The permissions, we talked about that a bit. So you can define permissions globally or on a given command. So the feedback, we talked about it a bit. So you have different feedback about, so when the command is executed, you have one. When it's successful, you have another. In this case, the command was so fast that you didn't see how it iterates on the reactions, but there are several steps.
Nice.
The help stuff we have seen. And then you have some examples of what you can do with airline. The meta, typically the fact that you can group commands in a group to actually organize your commands and make them more easily usable and readable. So that's that's pretty much it for that part.
And Guillaume, just to give, in case people, because you're using the Arcline CLI stuff, in Quarkus we all have Pico CLI.
Yes.
Just put on like what's the reason why Arcline over Pico CLI?
Yeah, so the main reason is that so Pico CLI is designed to be run once. That means that it will actually build all the metadata for parsing when you execute the command. What I wanted to do here is that I will have a bot which will, for which the commands will be executed a high number of times. So I don't want to actually parse the metadata every time a command is executed. That's suboptimal and really something we don't want to do. The nice thing with the airline library is that I can parse the command first, store that, and then reuse that for the actual parsing. So I parse the command, the metadata at startup. I keep that, and I use the metadata to parse the command when they are going. So it's it's really for optimization, because yes, it's nearly a CLI, but the big difference is that you execute a ton of commands instead of just one.
Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but remember I sort of like, why is that? Oh, and it makes sense that the approach is just, they're not because it's bad, it's just for this use case you need a bit more flexible.
Yeah, to be honest, Airline is a bit has less features than Pico CLI. Pico CLI is very complex and you can do a ton of stuff. But I think Airline has all the appropriate features you need for this particular use case. So I don't think you could be limited by that. And in any case, if at some point someone comes with something that really requires Pico CLI, I named the extension Command Airline with the idea in mind that at some point we might want a Pico CLI version or another CLI library that could have all the features of Pico CLI and also the ability to actually parse things at startup.
Yeah.
So that's all for the command-based command part. The other project I worked on was to make it possible to develop GitHub Actions with the exact same principle. So GitHub Action is a bit different because it's not a server, it's just you execute some code. So I remember, Max, you at some point you told me, but can you just use GBank to execute a script and you're done with it?
Yeah.
And that's true, you can.
Okay.
The only thing is that GitHub Actions come with commands. It comes with a context. It comes with the ability to call the REST API by injecting a secret or the GraphQL API. And once you add all that, it's still a lot to do manually if you just want to develop a quick script. And so that's all the Quarkus GitHub Action extension is actually handling for you. It's really more simple than the Quarkus GitHub App one. It's far less complex and things like that. But it actually does some nice things for you because it makes things a lot easier. Also, it adds some level of abstraction on top of GitHub Actions. Typically, recently, GitHub changed how outputs could be declared. Before that, you were somehow logging something. You were echoing some stuff to declare your output, and now you have to write to a file. And with this framework, you can just ignore that. You will use the set output command, and if at some point GitHub changes things again, we will just tweak things in the extension, and you can just continue to use it as you were doing it before. So that's, I think, a nice property of that, because I actually did it. I used the old API, and when they changed it, I changed the extension to use it. And the action that is actually using this extension, I didn't have to change it in any way. So that's also a nice property of it. So it also comes with some documentation. So the project is a bit newer than Quarkus GitHub App, but I think the documentation is also quite comprehensive. You have a guide to create your first GitHub action, and then you have a description of all the features with the examples and what you can do with them We will go through that a bit later. So just to give an example of what you can do, you can, a GitHub action has to be hosted in a GitHub repository. So the first thing what you will do when creating a GitHub action is actually creating a repository. Here I will just create an empty one. And then you will push the code of your action to this repository. And your action will have an action YAML file, which is some simple metadata to actually says what your action is doing. The nice thing with the extension is that all of that is actually generated for you. So let's stop that. And so here we will just create a Quarkus project with the Quarkus CLI as usual and get into the project. And if you have a look at it, you can see that we already have the action YAML file created. So, and if you have a look at the command, you can see that I actually told Quarkus where I whether I will put the code of the extension of the action. So Quarkus is taking that into account when generating the extension to make sure that typically the repository is actually properly set up in the action. And as you can see, Max, I used Gbang to execute the script. So yeah, it's just some wiring to make things a bit easier. But in the end, I'm just using Gbang to execute a jar that I publish to the repository GitHub Maven repository. So with this also comes some actions to publish everything where it should be. So we are using code start for that. You can see here that we actually have a specific code start. So it's a Quarkus feature that allows an extension to actually generate some code when creating the project. And in this case, we have everything wired for it to work just when you create the extension.
And is it just because, so for the app you didn't have a code start? Is that just because we don't have it, or it doesn't make sense in the same way? Or
well, it's it doesn't really make sense because it's standard Quarkus application. I mean, you don't need anything special.
Okay.
And also the reason why I didn't do it is that it actually uses other extensions which already have code starts. So if I enable them, I end up with random examples from other extensions, and I don't really want to confuse the user. So in the Quarkus GitHub App case, you start with an empty project. But in this case, it's very specific because really the structure of the project itself, how you built it, how you publish it, and the action YAML file, they are all tied to the extension, very specific to the extension. And so that's why I thought that we really needed a code start. And you will see why it's a good idea, because basically I created the project. I will just push it. So this time I just pushed it to GitHub. And so you will see it there. And you will see that the CI build has started. And one of the CI built in the publish artifact to GitHub's project Maven repository. So just by doing that, I have a simple action working that I can already use. I can use it in a workflow and it will work. It won't do anything useful, but it's going to work. So as soon as this is done, And as soon as this workflow is finished, I can use my action. So we already set up the PandaBot. So the PandaBot is also pushing the updates. So it created a pull request with the update. But here you can see that the workflow completed successfully. And so you have the packages here in the Maven repository of your action, and you can already use your action. Again, if you have a look at the code, it doesn't do anything useful. It just system out something. Okay. But let's maybe do something a bit more interesting. So we can just close this one and we can import this one there. Okay, so it's not doing anything useful at all. Now we have seen that GitHub Action has this notion of commands, and the nice thing is that we actually implement them. So if you have a look at, so it's probably too small, so let me read it, but you can, you have commands to actually generate a job summary. You have commands for errors, for warning, for setting outputs, for saving states, and basically all the commands that are supported by GitHub Actions are implemented there.
What does the job summary thing do?
Oh, you know, that's what I use in the build reporter. It's a way for an action to contribute something to the job summary. So the job summary is the index page you have when you, let me show you what the job summary is. No, not that one. So the job summary is basically when you go there, you have a job summary. This is the job summary page. And this command allows you to contribute something there at the bottom of it with markdown stuff. It can be anything. You just push markdown there in a file, and it will appear here when your action has finished. And that's what I use to, in the GitHub action, we use for the build reporter to actually contribute the report. So the report will be displayed here in Markdown. And so that's a very useful feature they added recently. And it's just one command away with Quarkus GitHub Action. So, we can, I think we can, I think it's that way. So let's try this. Let's try the error one. This one is simple, so we can easily check. And also, so this command, this will, so you have the action annotation, and that's what will trigger the action. There is some routing for that. I will show that later, but this is a very simple action that will be run always. That means that for any actions, for any event that triggers the action in the workflow, this one will be run. We can restrict the way when it is executed when using the annotation from Quarkus GitHub Apps. It's the exact same annotations we are using in Quarkus GitHub Apps. And here I can inject a payload. It's going to be an issue payload. What does it Oh, yes, stupid me. Okay. So this is, okay. And that way you can call the GitHub API and say, and as usual, it throws the exception. So as you can see, you have a very easy way to actually get the payload that was pushed by GitHub Actions. You have a very easy way to restrict your actions to a particular payload and execute different actions depending on the payload. Typically, I could, with the same action, get an issue payload. I could have a second method with the pull request payload and do something different for pull request. So you have all this. All this is possible. You can name the actions and have different actions with different names. And by adding a simple parameter to your workflow file, you could trigger a different method with the same GitHub action.
So I mostly associate actions with building code, but I guess it can do much more. So could you solve the same problem in two different ways with a bot or an action for something like handling an issue being opened? Yeah.
Exactly. The big difference is that with the bot, you just get a payload and the code is the code is actually executed on your infrastructure where you host the bot. You probably have a bit more flexibility there to do what you want. And also, you don't have the limitations of GitHub Actions. Typically for Quarkus, which is a rather crowded project, we can get stuck a bit on GitHub Actions with them piling up, and you have a limit of execution. So I usually recommend everything interactive to be pushed to a bot, so that you just get the payload, you do your stuff, and you call the GitHub REST API, and you're not actually dependent on the GitHub Action infrastructure. And everything that is more related to the build be pushed to a GitHub action. But you can listen to the issue event in GitHub Actions. And if an issue is open, you can execute some code. If you don't have anything to host your bot, then just do that in a GitHub action, and you can actually do a ton of things. All the events that are available in payloads are actually also available in GitHub Actions. So you can listen to a ton of events. I think the star event, for instance, is also, you can listen to it on GitHub Actions. So you can, if someone added a star to your project, you can actually run something on GitHub Action.
The big, like in the early days, before we had all this great framework, I wrote a GitHub action. We are still thinking it's there. Like when we edit an issue in GitHub and it has epic in the name or label, we go and reformat it. That's a GitHub action because it just runs. But the problem is we are now generating so much traffic on with issues that action gets run, and actually it takes time. And the problem is you can then, it's easy for users to actually do multiple things before the action finish. And that's a bit, so that's the thing is, actions are good for steps in let's call it a slow workflow. But yeah, a GitHub bot is much for like this, what Guillaume showed, like interactions and
what's interesting here is that if you start with a GitHub action, given we use the exact same principles in Quarkus GitHub App, you will be able to very easily port your code, your GitHub Actions code, to a bot. So if you start with a GitHub action, it won't be an issue. And the other way is also doable. If you start with a GitHub app and at some point it's not practical for you, you can just switch to Quarkus GitHub action. And that's pretty much it. So I pushed the changes, and you have seen that the workflows have been executed. So the action is published in the repository. And I have a playground project, which is there. So I hope the demo gods will be with me this time. And let's see how it goes.
And the cool thing is that you have the workflow. Yeah, the workflow can be doing anything, not just anything.
There, if you while the action is run, you can have a look at the workflow which is there. So it listens on the issue for being open, edited, and milestone.
Yeah.
And then so it actually set up Java, but you don't need to do it. JBank will do it for you if you don't need a specific Java version. And then it just runs the action. And while running the action, we push the GitHub token, which is generated by GitHub because we are using the REST API. So we want a GitHub token. And also, we need a GitHub token to actually download artifacts from GitHub's Maven repositories. So that's why the GitHub token is actually needed here. So let's have a look at our issue. You can see that GitHub Actions actually added a comment, the one that we put in the code. You can see you can see that if we are going to the log, there, you should be able to see the error. You have the system out there also. So basically, with the common stuff, you can do a lot of things. And if we have a look at all that is possible, so here is the simple routing. That's why I talked about earlier. You can execute several actions if you want, several methods. They will be executed in no particular order. You can use name actions. So in this case, you add a name. And when actually declaring your action, you will just use the name, and it will just execute this action and no others. And then you can inject various parameters. So you can inject the inputs. So when running an action, you actually define inputs, and you will be able to get all the inputs. There you have a few methods with checking that it's required, or another one which returns an optional method to return long or integers and things like that. And if you, or Boolean, and if you see a need for others, we can definitely add others. You have the context. So the context is a set of, basically we extract the environment variables from GitHub to expose them in a context object. You can get, for instance, the runner OS. And one thing that is handy is that if you want to see everything, you can just use context print, and you will see all the information displayed, and you can pick what you actually want to use. So you have the commands. We have seen how we could use it. You have the outputs, how to define outputs for your action.
You made it very complete.
Yes.
Cool.
So is this the first step of a chat ops empire? And then like next week you'll have Zulip, and the week after that you'll have Slack, or are you going to call it a day with this level?
So one thing that I would like at some point is to actually support GitLab for at least part of this. The thing is that I don't really have a need for that, and nobody actually. So we had a few people asking for that, but I mean, we are using GitHub, and I really would need someone maybe at Red Hat with an actual need for that, and something pressing to actually say, okay, let's have a look and see if it's possible. It would highly depend on how the GitLab API is actually implemented. I think they have a Java implementation, but depending on the architecture of it, it might be a lot harder than with the GitHub stuff.
Just yeah. We're actually running on the clock of an hour now.
Okay, so
let's conclude. Otherwise, you'll have to kind of up. It looks awesome, by the way.
So you have a few other comments. You have the ability to inject GitHub clients. So either the root REST API one or the GraphQL one.
Cool.
The payloads we have seen, and there is an interesting feature. You have the ability to actually put config files, either in YAML or JSON or even text files, into your repository. And when running the action will download the config file, deserialize it to an object, a Java object. And so you can very easily define templates or YAML file or whatever configuration file with that feature. And that's pretty much it for this one. So it's relatively new. We are using it for a while now with the Quarkus project to publish for the build reporter. And I'm pretty sure we will have some more usage soon. And feedback is very welcome if you want to give it a try. And don't hesitate to create issues, start discussions or whatever, and we can improve that. And it will be very welcome, both for the GitHub Apps and the GitHub Actions.
It's great, Guillaume, and I'm sorry, I really have to run.
Yes.
But that's awesome, and you put the link in the chat, and we'll get back.
Yeah,
looks really, really good. So if you want to do a GitHub action, try out Quarkus with Java. So awesome. Thank you, and we'll sign off.